the fake out. We already started. I forgot to turn that on. All right. But by faith, Joseph overcame betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment to save the nation of Israel. And by faith, God's people left Egypt and walked through the Red Sea as it parted on either side of them. And by faith, the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. These weren't perfect people. They were far from it, and in fact, kind of like us. You know, they were just like us. They all had their struggles and their doubts and their mistakes and infidelities, their flaws and their weaknesses. But they persevered in their faith and waited on God again and again. By faith, you'll get through this.
Yes.
Think about it. If you had everything figured out, you wouldn't need faith. You could live simply by your understanding, by your logic, but not by faith. But when you don't understand something, that gives you the unique opportunity to deepen your faith. I love this. Oswald Chambers said, "Faith is deliberate confidence in the character of God, whose ways you may not understand at the time." So, when things are falling apart all around you, or when your kids keep making wrong decisions, and everyone else says, "Oh man, they're so messed up, there's no hope," you believe by faith that God is working in their lives to bring about good to those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And when God promises you a child, even when you haven't been able to conceive, you believe by faith that God will bring it about. Or maybe He'll choose to give you a child by birth. Maybe it's going to be through adoption. No matter what He does, you continue to believe by faith. Maybe you don't even have enough money left for the rest of the month, but you're being obedient to God's word, and by faith, you give your tithe to Him, trusting Him as your ultimate provider. You listen and you write down what God is showing you. Then, as you wait, you continue to believe by faith. Faith isn't faith until it's all that's holding you up.
Amen.
If you don't have anything left to grasp, you continue to reach towards God. You press on one step after another, day by day, and even when things are going wrong, to live by faith, you don't stop, you don't quit, you don't go back.
Amen.
You walk
Hallelujah.
by faith.
Yes.
So this actually brings me thinking, I'm like, how does this, and for the longest time, because this happened last year when our basement flooded, and for the longest time, God kept telling me, no, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use this. I'm like, okay, well when, you know, I get a little bit impatient, because I'm like, when are you using this? In that time, He was growing my faith. He was growing many people's faith. Because if y'all saw, I wanted pictures up here, but evidently, I mean, our thing, it's just technology's just not working nowadays. Not here, but that's okay because God moves. Anyways, I wanted the pictures up to show you the before and afters. But if you guys saw, if you had been downstairs before, during, and then after, you would see that it required a lot of faith to just hang in there and just not give up. So what if you're living by faith and yet you don't see God's promise to you fulfilled in your lifetime? Right? Can you dare to believe that He'll still keep His promise, even if you don't get to see it during your time on earth? I think about the church. I do. I think about that often. I'm like, okay, God, you gave us this vision to do this church, and we have put so much into this. You know, for the last 7.5 years, we've really just poured into it. And sometimes, yes, it does get discouraging. But more often than not, it is encouraging, and it is awesome, and it is wonderful, and it is an honor to be able to serve the Lord in this environment, because I would have never thought this girl would be able to do this kind of thing. And I'm not talking about being up here, I'm talking about just being a part of a church. And so, you know, it's just amazing, from atheism to I love to party, you know, all that kind of stuff, crazy stuff. I would have never thought. I would have never thought.
That is good.
But if you hang in there, those little seeds that are planted in Sunday school, or right down the road, some of you all have heard the testimonies that I had a church that was right down the road from where I lived, and so I could go every once in a while if I wanted to, because it's a small town, 300 people, back in the day where you weren't threatened to go outside of your home, and a little kid could walk up the street by themselves. And I just did. I was drawn to that place. I didn't, we were holiday people, so we would on holidays. Otherwise, that wasn't big. But those people that now have passed on believed and had faith that the things that they are doing for the Lord will come to pass, even though they may not see it.
Amen.
They don't get to see today that, hey, I told that girl about Jesus. And look, I have the opportunity to keep it rolling. So have faith, keep going, and don't give up. Because sometimes we may not see it, but it's not for our glory anyways. It's for His.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
So is it possible that you might grow so intimate with God during this time that you're able to keep loving and serving Him despite your disappointments? Because how easy is it to be disappointed when you don't see something happening right now, or in a year, or this or that? Because it is disappointing. I mean, it really, to be honest, we're all human. Okay, so some people say this differently, but I like to say it like this because it's fun. Habakkuk. I don't know how y'all will say it, but I like to say it like that. But you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, you know the book? Okay. Is a good teacher for us on this lesson, because it was not until the next generation that God kept His promise and punished the Babylonians. He didn't even get to see it. That's a long time to wait.
Yes.
But the Lord, He's still faithful, and He always is. That's no joke. Nobody can tell me that the Lord is not faithful. You cannot pay me enough money to make me believe otherwise. Habakkuk gives us 3 little words that we can cling to when it appears that God has not delivered on what He promised. No matter what you might be going through, never let go of these words. If you truly want to come out of the valley that you may be in and grow closer to the Lord, then here's what you hold tightly onto. And if you want to be able to grow closer to God no matter what, then there are these 3 words that you need to remember on your journey toward intimacy and ultimate trust and faith in Him. But the Lord. You'll find these words in Habakkuk 2:20, where the prophet, after acknowledging that he still doesn't like what's going on, says, "But the Lord is in His holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before Him."
Yes.
So even though I get upset, I'm angry, confused, and frustrated, disappointed, and impatient, I remember who God is.
Yes.
The Lord is still in charge. He hasn't handed over the reins to you or to anybody else.
That's right.
He's still in charge, and He's good. He's righteous, and He's true, and He's faithful, and He's all-knowing, all-powerful, and ever-present. He doesn't leave you. We may try to leave Him, but He doesn't leave you. The world may seem upside down, but the Lord is still there. He's sovereign, and He has a plan, a much bigger plan than I can see right now. It's something that, when everything happened downstairs and stuff, I mean, we were grasping, we're like, oh my goodness, is this just really our downfall? Because so many people at the beginning told us, well, you'll never make it because that church just doesn't go on. It doesn't. Everybody's given up. Everybody's walked out. Everybody has said it's so hard. Or, this or that or whatever. You're not going to make it.
But God made it.
God will make it.
Amen.
We ain't got no problem with that. He's in control. Even though it doesn't look like we think it should look at times. God is good.
Yes.
God is righteous. He's true. He's faithful. He's all-knowing, all-powerful, and He's ever-present. And He's here.
Thank you, Lord.
And He's not going to leave us.
Amen.
He has a bigger plan than that I can see right now. He has a bigger plan than what you can see right now. Whether it's your finances, your marriage, your kids, your homes, your whatever situation you are in, he has a bigger plan than what you can see right now. So I have to respect that he is God, and I'm not, right? His timing isn't my timing. His ways are higher than I'll ever understand. He is supreme in all wisdom, and he knows the end from the beginning. I'm just a person, his creation. He has everything under control. Sometimes our faith is tested until it feels like there's hardly anything left. But here's amazing news. Jesus told us that even with just a speck of faith, as tiny as a mustard seed, that we can move mountains. How crazy is that? That is beyond our understanding, right? I mean, it's beyond mine. And I'm no genius, I know that, but it's way beyond my understanding. If you want to believe, then you're pressing in with all your might toward knowing God and trusting him, even when your strength is nearly gone. And what if wanting to believe is enough? What if that tiny bit of barely noticeable faith is still pleasing to God? Because it is. What if simply wanting to believe is the mustard seed of faith? We see people who were put to the test in circumstances every bit as painful and perhaps more personal than Habakkuk's pain and circumstance. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I always think of VeggieTales with this story all the time. If y'all haven't seen that VeggieTales, go look at it. I'll tell you, I got the VHS tape and a VCR, so if you want to borrow it. But I'm sure it's on Netflix. Anyways, their very lives were at stake, and they faced a terrible dilemma. But in the end, theirs was an easy choice. They said, King Nebuchadnezzar is telling us to bow down and worship him instead of God, or he'll throw us in the fiery furnace. We're not going to bow down and worship a man. Even if that man is a king, we believe that God will deliver us. We believe that God will rescue us. But even if he doesn't, it'll still be okay. We're not bowing down to anyone but our Lord. Do you see that deep, inward, unshakable faith in a trustworthy God? They knew the character of God. Their faith did not shake. They knew the character. They knew who he was. And he is. Their faith wasn't based on the outcome that they desired. It was a faith based on only the character and the goodness of God. Essentially, these three teenagers stood boldly and declared, we believe our God can, we believe our God will. But even if he doesn't, we still believe. That's hard. That is so hard. How could they have such confidence? How could they be willing to die instead of take a life-saving mulligan and then ask God for forgiveness later? You know, I think that we've all done that before. We're like, well, God will forgive me, so yeah. Well, they didn't do that. They did what they did because they believed that God had everything under control, and that was good enough for them. They knew that even if they died a terrible, excruciating death in the flames of the king's furnace, God was still God. They believed that he was Lord on his throne and that they simply had to do their part and trust him. And what about Job? Talk about seeing your whole life unravel. He lost everything. But he could not make sense of why. His friends told him that obviously he was being punished, and yet Job couldn't think of anything he'd done to displease God. Certainly not on such an extreme scale. His wife told him that he should just, curse God and renounce the one who had clearly abandoned him. He refused. Instead, he lived by faith. And he became even more intimate with God. Job said, though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. It's Job 13:15. Nothing could strip Job's faith from him. So you might be shocked at how your trial can reveal a depth of faith you never knew you possessed. 1 Peter in 1:7, not 1 Peter, but Peter 1:7 says this, these trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold, so when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. Habakkuk didn't get the answer he wanted from God, but he still believed. Although his life was about to grow even harder, he still chose to keep the faith. He knew that God was still God. He knew that God was still in charge, and no matter what Habakkuk experienced, he kept coming back to those three little words that carry such enormous power. But the Lord. Extreme circumstances require extreme faith. So here's something that I'm going to talk about, that just a tiny bit of faith is actually kind of extreme.
Amen.
I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. I've already mentioned most of it. But when I walked downstairs, the day that I thought I heard something downstairs sounding like water, because I was sitting up in the office, I walked down there into a puddle that was just growing and growing and growing and kind of laughing at me in a sense. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we had had trouble before with the sewer backing up. It happened to be on a day that we had bluegrass. We had people coming, and a lot of people coming to enjoy this community event of a bluegrass concert that we held here, and that's the first day that it backed up. Okay? The next time, when I went downstairs, that next day, we were supposed to have another bluegrass concert here. Okay? So I'm thinking, oh great, wonderful, how wonderful. This is going to work out perfect. That was my sarcasm. I was not immediately, I didn't walk down there and say, oh, I have faith that everything's going to be okay. I looked at my circumstances instead of looking at the Lord. And I was like, great, wonderful, it just must be the bluegrass music, I don't know. So our toilets backed up, water came out, our sheetrock, nasty, icky, nasty. A lot of the stuff that I had brought in for children's church from my daycare, nasty, ruined. The carpet, ruined. The cabinets in the kitchen, ruined. There was like this much water with those cabinets. And granted, we wanted to gut it out anyways, eventually. Come to find out, God's just going to take care of it the way that we didn't think that it was supposed to happen, because it was really inconvenient timing for us. But it was very convenient timing for him.
Amen.
And so, with just a little seed of faith, after he sat there and started talking to me and saying, it's going to be okay. And I still pulled up to the church and got angry. But he's like, I'm going to work on you. I'm going to work on you. Because I got up and I'm thinking, man, I'm like, we are working so hard at this. And we are trying. And all these people are putting time and effort into this. And look, what are you doing, God? What are you doing? We had to have a porta potty outside. How terrible does that look? We have all of our summer people that come in to Walker, Minnesota during the summer, and they see this church that has a porta potty outside. They're thinking, what in the world? Come to find out, more people came that summer than we've had before. God knew what he was doing, even though there was a porta potty out there. You know what I mean? Just having a little bit of faith. That, honestly, the porta potty thing increased my faith a lot. Because somebody even mentioned that had been coming here for a long time, and still is coming here, had mentioned, you know, we really thought that that porta potty was going to deter people. But there's a lot more people coming. And I'm like, I know, how crazy is that? Like, God can use anything. So I want you guys to be encouraged and just have that, find that faith, just that little bit of faith. Okay? That's an extreme faith, because sometimes in your circumstance, it's really hard to see it. That's when you gather around with your brothers and sisters and say, look, here's my deal, what's going on, and maybe they can help you see that little thing where you can have that faith, and that faith can build and grow. So anyways, that's the porta potty story. When you have nowhere else to turn but a porta potty. No, I'm just kidding. When you have nowhere else to turn, when your own ideas and resources have evaporated, it makes me think of the water. Eventually, It evaporated downstairs. All of our resources were ruined
Yes.
because we wanted to start this, we wanted to start that. The place that we needed to use was completely ruined. It's our own ideas. Not that they were bad ideas. God just had better ones to go along with what He's already instilled in us. He'll instill in us what He wants to get out of us. When your control over a situation is in shambles,
Yes.
God is still there.
Yes, amen.
When your knees ache
Hallelujah.
from kneeling in prayer, but you can't tell if He's even listening, God is still there.
Amen.
When people laugh at you, mocking you for your faith, God is still there. When you don't know if you can make it another day, God, He's still there.
Amen.
When the voice of your enemy is whispering to you that you should just give up, God is still there. He loves you and He is for you. He will never leave you, nor will He forsake you. He will never, ever, ever, ever let you down. Sometimes it may look like He's letting you down, but there's something bigger.
Amen.
Don't forget that, because it can really be discouraging, and you have all faced it at one point in your life where you're just like, this doesn't even make any sense. This hurts, this stinks, I can't handle this, I don't want to do it anymore. Just remember that God is still there, and He loves you. A love that you can't even comprehend or fathom. He's for you. He's not against you. He will never leave you, nor will He forsake you, and He'll never let you down. He may not do exactly what you want, but He's always faithful, no matter how much your circumstances may seem to indicate otherwise. No matter what happens in your life, the Lord is in His holy temple. Sometimes you might think that God has forgotten you. And when you think that, that's when you have forgotten who God is.
Amen. Yes.
So, a lot of times there's things that we can bring up really quickly, like our ABCs, things that we use on a daily basis, words, whatever, our social security numbers, our PINs for this and for that. All those kind of things. A smell may trigger a remembering memory, just going up to certain places. Like I go up to my hometown and so many memories just come flooding back. But I think about them often. A lot of times we remember what matters most to us because we replay it often in our memory. One of the best aids to coming out of a valley with no hope and just we all go through that time.
Yeah.
Some of us longer than others, some of us not all the time, some of us all the time. It's all different. God's trying to do something there. One of the best things to get us out of the valley is remembering what God has done for us.
Yes.
Not just what He has done for people in the Bible, for the nation of Israel, for our parents, for our friends, or even for our church, but what He's done for you and me. If we can just remember those little things, if you have trouble remembering like I do, you need to write them down. My mom always used to tell me that. Write things down, write things down. I was like, no! Full out rebellion. I will not do what my mother says. Now, I like to write things down. I see why she told me that. Habakkuk understood this. In the third and final chapter of his book, we find this prayer, which we're told is on Shinag. I can never pronounce this. On Shiganol. I even practiced this before I came up here. While scholars don't know exactly what Shiganoth, I bet you that's it, means, it's likely a musical or literary form. So basically, Habakkuk chose a specific artistic structure or setting in which to share his prayer. Even though we don't know the precise form, it strikes me that the same guy who was asking God for something, rather accusing questions, has now changed his tune. We see this same kind of movement from doubt to faith in the Psalms. It's similar to singing a worship song that acknowledges how hard life is and yet how much we can trust God. It's another step, a really big one in the journey out of the valley. But climbing out of the valley is not just trying to go through the motions and putting on a happy face when you're really hurting and troubled. People tell me sometimes that they can't come to church and sing upbeat songs and, the feel-good worship songs and all these happy, smiley people and all that kind of stuff when they're suffering through a financial crisis or their child's addiction or the results of a medical test. And I tell them it's okay. They can still worship God from where they're at, where they are. We all can. And I also tell them it's important to gather around your brothers and sisters. It says so in the Word. Can't give you the exact address, but it does say that. Because I used to think that way sometimes. I was like, I don't want to go to church today. I don't feel like it. I don't want to. Then I read in the Word. He told me exactly what I needed to know. It's important for you guys to gather around so that we can also create a culture, a God culture. Habakkuk prays, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. That just strikes me today. I mean, how often are we calling out nowadays? I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord, to repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. That's Habakkuk 3:2. There's a respectful, appreciative tone to the way he begins here. It's as if he were saying, well, if I'm honest, God, I've seen past seasons in which your presence seemed more real than now. You were doing big things then, and I know that's the kind of God you are. But please do those same kind of things again for us now. Repeat all those great feats that I know you've done before. And in fact, the Hebrew word that's translated repeat there is shaya, which simply means to renew, to revive, or to restore. And from there, Habakkuk's prayer lists some very tangible and visible places and events that will trigger spiritual memories for God's people. He lists specific locations like Teman, Mount Paran, Cushan, and Midian. He also mentions several of God's creations, ancient mountains, rivers, streams, heavens and earth, sun and moon. These verses may not have the same effect on us as they did to the people in Habakkuk's day, but the call to remember what God has done remains timeless even for us. So Habakkuk understood the power of this kind of remembering, bringing it back and going into worship with the Lord. And he paints a vivid picture of God displaying his glory and power through nature, helping the people remember. I can almost imagine him saying, God, I remember what you did. You stunned us all with your power and your glory. I remember when you guided your people by fire and by a cloud. I remember when you fed us with bread from heaven. And I remember when the waters parted and we walked through on dry land. I remember when you shook the earth and the walls came tumbling down. I remember when you used torrential rains to defeat people who wanted to harm us. And I remember when you sent pestilence and plagues against our enemies. God, I remember what you can do. Now please renew those deeds in our day. When we're in the valley, sometimes you simply need to remember. I just have to recall all that God has done in my life, for me, through me, even in spite of me. Sometimes he uses us even though we don't care. Or there's so many times that there'll be certain people that I'm just like, I don't, whatever. And he just kind of goes like this and uses me and talks through me. And I'm like, did I really just do that? And it's a teaching moment to me because my heart needs to be softened. It needs to be softened and it needs to have the love that God has for me, for those people. So in spite of yourself, he can still use you. So neener. That's how I think of it. I return to those. I return to who I know God is in those times. And when I can't see him in my present situation, I remember what he's done in the past. And I remember when we've had this time and I've talked to these people, even when I wasn't a Christian at the time, I just remember those times and I can see it now, that he was right there, and he was using those moments, whether it was that person using to speak to me or the other way around. So in spite of ourselves, he can still use us. So take that, all right? Sometimes you go up to people and you say, and this is really nerve-wracking for me, it may be nerve-wracking for y'all, I don't know, maybe you're more bold than I am, or fearless, or more confident in who the Lord really is than me. But walking up to somebody and be like, God totally put you on my heart today, and I really feel like I should tell you or call you, whatever you need to do, whatever he tells you to do. I have trouble doing that sometimes because I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of somebody saying, what? There's not even a God, and all that kind of stuff. I'm afraid of that, and that's ridiculous because I know who God is.
Amen.
I do, and I just have to increase that faith the size of a mustard seed. So my question for you today is, what do you do when you're in the valley? Right? You remember what God has done.
Yes.
You remember when he comforted you, and when he guided you, and when he answered your prayer exactly the way you wanted him to, and when he didn't do what you wanted, but sometimes later you realized that it was exactly what you needed. And you dare to believe that what he's done before, that he will do it again.
Amen.
So sometimes, we can do crazy things, and people put their heads in the sand. Okay, they see the storm coming, and sometimes people don't prepare for the reality, the inevitability that what will hit. They don't face the truth. They just put their head in the sand, pretending that they're still like in the Garden of Eden. Maybe God's trying to tell you something through your circumstances. Something like, pull your head out of the sand now. Habakkuk certainly could not keep his head in the sand. After he questioned God, and the Lord responded by telling him that he was going to use the wicked Babylonians to destroy Israel. Habakkuk said, I heard, and my heart pounded, my lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. His response is visceral. You know that sinking sensation when you get in your gut, when something bad happens that's beyond your control? You know how your body just tries to absorb whatever you're going through, and your muscles tense up and stiffen, and you get headaches and stomach aches, and some people get twitches, and all that stuff. Well, imagine God telling you that he's going to use your nation's worst enemy to destroy you. That's what Habakkuk was facing. He looked truth squarely in the face and said, this is not going to be a fun season. It's going to be awful. A lot of innocent people are going to die, and probably people I love, probably me. There's going to be a lot of bloodshed, and I don't like that. But I have to trust God, even though I don't fully understand.
Yes.
That's not denial, that's faith. Not faith that God will do what Habakkuk wants God to do, but faith in God's character. Habakkuk goes on to say that the sovereign hand of God is doing something here. God has spoken, so I'll accept whatever he's doing, as difficult as that might be for me. Sometimes something is going to happen that you don't like, and it may be happening right now. Sometimes you just need more patience, sincere faith, deeper trust, even if your cat isn't coming home. Y'all had a cat pass away on you?
Yeah.
I have. And it's sad.
Yeah.
And sometimes when mine did, I didn't understand. I did not understand. So how do you pull yourself out of the valley? You remember what God has done.
Mm-hmm.
You accept what God is doing. And you trust what God is going to do.
Yes.
So, again, I want to reiterate, if you think that God has forgotten about you, then you have forgotten who God is.
Mm-hmm.
So I just encourage you guys to, maybe if your faith is like this big, size of a mustard seed, to remember who God is and remember what God can do with that faith the size of a mustard seed. That's it for today. We can go home with faith the size of a mustard seed
Yes.
and watch what God does. Remember who He is. Figure out what, if you don't know what God's character is like, I encourage you to get in the Word. I encourage you to talk to other Christians and hear their testimonies, because through their testimonies you'll also understand what God's character is.